Ladies and gentlemen, if you could please rise for the family. Officiating today's services is Cantor Danielle Ben-Simone. The Jewish people respond to death with 3 words of blessing. In English, the words mean praised is the judge of truth. Let us begin our service with the wisdom of our tradition. Please repeat these words of blessing after me. Baruch Dayan HaEmet, which means praised is the judge of truth. And continuing, Adonai Natan Vadonai Lakach Yehi Shem Adonai Mivorach. Adonai has given and Adonai has taken. Praise be the name of Adonai. We'll begin today with Psalm 23. I'll chant it first, and then we will read it together in English. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai roi lo echzar, bino desher bitzeni, al menuchot ינעלני. נפשי ישובב, ינחני במעגלי צדק. ינחני במעגלי צדק, למען שמו. גם כי לך בגן מוות, לא רק כי אתה עמדי, שבטך ומשענתך המה ינחמוני. תערוך לפניי שולחן נגד צורריי. דשנת ושמן ראשי, כוסי רוויה. אך טוב בחסד ירדפוני כל ימי חיי, כל ימי חיי, ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים. אדוני רואי לא אכזר, אדוני רואי לא אכזר. A Psalm of David together. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. From the book of Ecclesiastes. לכל זמן ועת לכל חפץ תחת השמיים, עת ללדת ועת למות, עת לטעת ועת לעקור נטוע, עת להרוג ועת לרפוא, עת לפרוץ ועת לבנות, עת לבכות ועת לשחוק, עת ספוד ועת רקוד. A season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven. A time for planting and a time for reaping, a time for keeping and a time for discarding, a time for loving and a time for hating, a time for embracing and a time for refraining, a time for slaying and a time for healing, a time for laughing and a time for weeping, a time for dancing and a time for wailing, a time for birthing and a time for dying, a time for speaking and a time for silence, a time for seeking and a time for losing. We are here today to remember our beloved Howard Silver, to celebrate the life that he has had and has radiated for us, the joy and the love and the happiness and the friendship. And I have some of his family here today that would like to say some words, share some memories, offer some remarks. I would first like to welcome up Andrew, his son, one of his sons.
Okay, thank you for being here. It goes without saying, this is the hardest thing that I've ever written, and I'm not really even sure where to start. I guess I will begin with what I know about Dad as a person, and then I'll talk a little bit about him as a father and a friend. Much of this, many of you already know as his family and his close friends, but I hope it's helpful for everyone here today and watching online as we try to come to terms with things today and in the future. Dad was incredibly loyal. And he had a wit that everybody loved. He loved to laugh. And he loved to rib you a little bit too. But he was always laughing with you. He was never laughing at you. He made you feel welcome. He asked questions and he genuinely listened to the answers. He wanted to see you do well. He was happy when you were happy. Now, of course, he had a perspective on what you should do to be happy and get happy. And he often shared that perspective along with his famous phrase, "I'd never steer you wrong." And he didn't. But, you know, of course, I'd inevitably rebel against his advice. And when I did, he'd always be supportive regardless. He knew that he could only make decisions up to a certain point and the rest was up to me. Eventually, I'd finally realized that he was right. But he never once said, "I told you so." Never, not once. He didn't settle for good enough. Maybe in some places he did, because over time, as he got older, he came to understand where he had control and where he didn't. And I don't think anyone in our family is very good at letting go of control. But he started to learn a little bit about that as he got older. He knew the importance of the little details and the difference those details made between good and great. He wanted to be great, a great son, a great brother, a great husband, father, grandfather, a great dentist, and a great friend. And he was great at all of those things. He wasn't perfect, and nobody is, but his intentions were always good. As a father, he taught me many things, and those lessons make me the father and husband I am today. He was present and he cared. He didn't mail it in or pretend. Being a father mattered to him, and he wanted to provide whatever he possibly could to all of his children. He knew that he was strict, and he knew that sometimes he could be a little bit scary. But he worked hard at gaining perspective on what the important things in life truly were and are. And he taught us how to be gentle, yet true to our convictions. One lesson that stays with me at my core, and please forgive the language, Andrew, sorry, is, and most of you probably have heard him say this, but never bullshit a bullshitter. He said it a million times. And he usually would say that to me when I was trying to pull something stupid or trying to get one over on him, and that never really worked. But what I've come to realize in the years past is what he really meant was be honest. So you can look at yourself in the mirror with integrity. Knowing that you tried everything you possibly could do to do the right thing. That's who Dad was. He tried hard to do the right thing, and he was someone you could count on. Later in life, once his back would no longer allow him to play golf, he became a painter, and he dove in with his typical enthusiasm. It wasn't just the act of painting that he found so fulfilling. He wanted to express himself, and he wanted to create something that he could give and share, give to and share with others. Something that would leave a mark on those around him. I can honestly say that he didn't need to paint to make that mark. He was an incredible man, and his memory is a blessing for everyone here today and everyone watching online. I am so grateful to be his son. And for my wife and children to have gotten to know him so well. I will miss you terribly, Dad. And while you're no longer here in physical form, your mark, your expression, and the art that was your life and is your legacy will live on for generations to come. I love you.
Thank you so much, Andrew, for those beautiful words and memories about Dad. I'd like to welcome up Stephen, another son of Howard's.
Well, if you knew my dad, like all of you did, this 12 o'clock service should have started at 11:45. My earliest memory of Dad was sitting in his lap in our living room in Colts Neck, New Jersey. He held me tight and I felt safe. Soon after that, I found myself living in another house. Limited to weekend and holiday visits, he still found a way to make me feel loved and important. Going off to college, the distance between us grew by mileage. But Dad was famous for those early Sunday morning calls. The phone would ring and my roommate would not even hesitate. Steve, it's your dad. Over the years, the calls were much more frequent, 3 or 4 times a week. His opening line, "What's the good word? You making any money?" What he really wanted to know was how his grandchildren were. He would gush every time one of them called, and he would go on and on about their conversations and love to hear about how they were all doing. There were many things I admired about my dad. His sense of humor and command of the room, they were at the top. He was at his best at his 90th birthday. Jane, you knocked that one out of the park. It was, I say, the best family event we had. Weddings, bar mitzvahs, we had a blast. We were all together just the way he wanted it. But the 2 things I admired most were the love that he had for Jane and his brother Alan. Jane, I witnessed it obviously these 53 years, but this weekend was amazing. You wouldn't let him be alone for not 1 minute. And if you thought that he wasn't getting the best of care, you jumped and you let everyone know what the priority was. And you took care of business. And for us New Jerseyans being so far away, that was so comforting to know all these years. And Rachel, you too, by his side, your great daughter. And we all played second fiddle to the 2 of you, Alan and you, Jane. It was okay with us. I was lucky enough to see Dad this past weekend, and we had our last conversation on Monday. We got the chance to say the things that a father and son want to say to each other. And I'm very grateful for that. I love you, Dad, and I'll miss you.
Thank you so much, Stephen, for your heartfelt words. Truly, thank you. Just a little reminder to please check and make sure your phones are on silent and any alarms are off so that we can continue peacefully and retain this sacred space right now. I would like to welcome up Ben, one of Howard's grandsons, Rachel's son.
People who spoke before me, you guys are amazing. Yeah, you can hear me here. I want to start with something my Uncle Drew mentioned in his speech. He spoke about my Grandpa Howard's wit, something that resonates to anyone who met him. He was an incredibly intelligent man. He was incredibly sharp mentally. He knew what was going on until, I believe, a couple days before when he had intellectual conversations with my mom, my grandma, and even me for that matter. This was something that inspired me, but it's for a reason that I want to share to everyone here. Wisdom is a word that comes to mind when I think of my grandfather. 92 years, he's met a lot of people, he's talked to a lot of people, he's done a lot of things. He's an experienced man. And I've learned a lot from him. Something specific that I learned from him, though, was I look at some of the challenges that he's faced in my lifetime. I only knew him for 18 years. And these people knew him for a lot longer. But I believe he was around 87 years old, 88, and he was in the hospital for back pain. That was the reason. It wasn't anything, I would say, severe, but he was in the hospital for back pain. And what he did every morning, he didn't complain. He was not a complainer. He was positive. His positivity was a superpower, in my opinion. It's something that we are in control of. And my Grandpa Howard had full control of his mind. He was positive, and as I said, he did not complain. His attitude was unbelievable, better than probably any of us could ever imagine. And it was something that I admired, and it's something that I tried to strive for in my own life, and I believe other people should as well. And he mastered that. And I have several stories to share about that, but specifically speaking back about his back pain, when we would speak about how you're doing in the hospital, et cetera, he would always say it could be a lot worse. And for an 88-year-old man to say it could be a lot worse as his way of overcoming things was nothing short of inspirational to me. If he can overcome these things, and the way that he's coping is by saying it could be a lot worse, who am I to complain about anything in my life? How could I not overcome my own challenges? How could any of us not overcome our challenges when my 88-year-old grandfather is saying it could be a lot worse on a day-to-day basis? Additionally, I have a story where just goes back to how my grandfather was not a complainer and how he was positive and how this positivity was a superpower. Was me, myself, my mother, my brother, my Uncle Steve, who just spoke. There was a baseball tournament that my cousin Michael was playing on a team for. It was in Lakeland, Florida, which you might not know about that town, which probably for good reason. It's not the best town. We stayed in, if you looked up the hotel, 1.5 to 2 stars would be reasonable. It didn't matter to my grandpa, though. It mattered much more to my brother and I. It genuinely did not matter. And the best meal we had was quite literally a sub at Jersey Mike's that entire weekend. The point I'm trying to make is that he was with his family the entire weekend. An 88-year-old man driving 4 hours. Not a single ounce of complaining. Not a single ounce of anything outside of pure joy. How could you not admire this person and just want to strive to have that level of positivity and that type of attitude in your day-to-day life? Michael didn't even pitch that entire weekend, so we didn't even get the same pitch. But it didn't matter, as I said, because my grandpa Howard was a positive person. He looked on the bright side. He was grateful for what he had, not ungrateful for what he didn't have, something my mother tells me often. Thank you.
Ben, I think your grandfather, I know your grandfather is grinning ear to ear in pride of you, of your words, of your composure today. And on behalf of all of his grandchildren, speaking and carrying on a legacy of love. Thank you. I'd like to welcome up Rachel, his daughter.
Normally, people don't like to go after me, but Ben, this is going to be tough. I want to start by saying how aware I am that even on the best of days, I'm long-winded. I have tried and tried and tried to edit my remarks. But the truth is, and in fairness to my dad, I don't know if I can. And frankly, if you know him, he probably wouldn't want me to. After all, as much as Howard loved every single one of us, Howard also loved, well, Howard. I say that affectionately because while he certainly was the embodiment of compassion, empathy, humility, kindness, warmth, generosity of spirit, and of course, a one-of-a-kind sense of humor, he had a rare, remarkable ability to strike the balance between those characteristics and also his love of self. His confidence, inner strength, and pure love of who he was is something I deeply admired. So with that said, not only am I certain he's here with us, I suspect he's taking attendance, while also incredibly humbled and in awe of the outpouring of love and support you have all shown for our family, both here physically and those of you on Zoom. So please bear with me. The loss of my father is unquestionably difficult. However, it's been said, if we can share our stories and address our grief through storytelling, then it turns the cave into a tunnel. It adds oxygen to our lives. Instead of cutting us off, it opens us up. I would like to try to add oxygen to all of our lives and open us up by sharing about my dad. For many of you in this room, it should come as no surprise how much I have always loved storytelling about my dad. I've loved it because if you're lucky enough to have Howard Silver as your father, you never take for granted the gift of being nourished with his wisdom and presence. I learned at a very early age just how special he was when I stumbled upon his name in the leather-bound book titled Who's Who that sat on the bookshelves in the back of our living room. I was a little girl, and though I didn't know what any of it meant per se, I knew how it made me feel. I was proud. That was my dad. There are countless moments that followed where my feelings instinctually echoed, wow, that's my dad. Giving someone the Heimlich maneuver and saving lives. When Andrew and my playing got a little too rough and my 2 front teeth were knocked out of my mouth at the precise moment my dad walked in the door from work. He didn't miss a beat. He calmly picked the teeth up off the floor, rinsed them off, and literally slammed them back in my mouth. They're your baby teeth, he said. They'll reattach to the root. You'll be fine. Wow, really, Dad? You can do that? Spending time in the office with my dad yielded a whole host of wow moments. Patients lining up at the door from morning till night, day after day, except on Wednesdays, singing his praises. Most people dreaded going to the dentist, but not my dad's patients. I'd sometimes sit in his waiting room and flip through those highlights magazines. But I quickly became more interested in the big binders displayed on the table that held dozens and dozens and dozens of patient surveys and personal testimonials. I guess it was like today's version of a Yelp review. I would read every last one, beaming with pride over how my dad's gentle touch and temperament made fears of going to the dentist dissipate. Wow, that was my dad. My dad treated everyone who crossed his path with respect. It didn't matter their name, rank, or serial number. He always said, it doesn't cost extra to be nice. Treat people how you would want to be treated. So it never surprised me when the likes of Oscar the tailor, or Bernie the driver, Nick the bartender, Phyllis the waitress, or Ray from the beach club, who made the world's best Jersey tomato salad, became part of our household conversations. Often my dad wouldn't hesitate for a second to pick up Henry the caddy, who he would see walking home from the golf course after a long day. My dad would slow down the car, tell him to hop in, and offer to drive him home. But not before they made a pit stop at our home, had us pull up a chair, and Henry would join us for dinner. For decades, he was a breakfast regular at Frank's Deli, never having to order because they knew when he came in to just have it ready. He toggled between Irv's and Carmela's for lunch, always greeted like the legend he was. There were lots and lots of oohing and eyeing when he walked in. He'd say, "Hiya, Carmela. What's the good word?" To which Carmela would reply, "Oh, Dr. Silver, I have your favorite today, split pea soup." My dad would smile, give a wink, and say, "Atta girl, I'll take it," piping hot. Most of my life lessons I learned from my dad when we would take our weekly neighborhood walks, just him and me, typically after a long work week was over, late on a Saturday. We'd stroll up and down Golf Road and then back and forth on the corner of Crosby Avenue. We'd talk about control, and he'd say, "We've got to learn to adjust and adapt no matter what hand we've been dealt." We talk about money. He'd famously say, we got to learn to save some, spend some, and give some to charity. We talk about the value of time and the importance of respecting it. By the letter of the law, I'm sure we can all say this one in unison. 5 minutes early is on time, and if you're on time, you're late. Dad, you won on that one. But I think every person whose last name is Silver is a little traumatized. And we might be having a family meeting in a couple weeks and loosen the grip on that. We talk about his dental practice. He shared over and over how much he loved getting up in the morning and going to the office, how excited he was every single day. He'd say, I'm not really in the business of dentistry. I'm in the business of people. The way he connected with his patients was unprecedented. Tiny, he'd say. He's been calling me Tiny since I was born. Tiniest of the tinies, he'd say. If you find something you love to do, it will never feel like work. We talked about what it meant to be a good person. There are givers and there are takers in this world, he'd say. Tiny, be a giver. My dad was a very, very, very sensitive man. Sometimes he didn't always have the exact words to say, but he was never shy to express his feelings through tears. Happy tears, sad tears, any kind of tears. I had a front row seat learning the lesson that real men do indeed cry. I'm sorry. As I got older, there were other iterations of his teachings. Some came in the form of a letter he'd put in the mail. Tiny, I think you might enjoy this article. Love, Dad. Or he'd slip a business card into my wallet, and on it he would write, number 1, brush. Number 2, floss. Number 3, get a date. One time he sent me an envelope. In it was a small dental x-ray, of whose teeth I don't know, but he wrote in very fine print, "Hi, Tiny," with a little smiley face. I still have it with my personal belongings. I have it with me today. All of this is not to say he wasn't a disciplinarian. Boy, was he ever. Back in the day, he was strict, tough. He was the boss. Rules were rules, and they were meant to be followed. Looking back, some of them were a bit ridiculous, but we knew better than to outright disobey. Shoveling the snow was a mandate. The driveway, the front walk, and the back porch. I would literally be freezing my ass off, begging to come in. Dad, please check. I think it's good now. More times than not, he'd say, nope, keep going. Do a little more. Don't be afraid of hard work. It'll be good for you, he said. It teaches you stick-to-itiveness. There was no TV allowed during the week. It'll fry your brain, he said. You don't need to watch rats running around a barn. I think he was talking about Tom and Jerry or Bugs Bunny. He was. He'd say, go upstairs and read a book, or better yet, pull out the encyclopedia, pick any letter, open it up, study it, and write a report. Don't come down until you're ready to have a 4-syllable word about it. A conversation. And then there were always some sort of quiz. I'd sit at the dinner table in full-blown panic mode if we were past the halfway mark of the meal, knowing some sort of test was about to begin. Current events, spelling and grammar, and the bane of my entire existence, mathematical word problems about percentages. Dad, I don't know. I have a mental block. I don't understand, I would say. He'd be furious because it was so simple and he just didn't understand why I couldn't get it. Rachel, when it came to percentages, he didn't call me tiny. Let me ask it again. If I have 10 apples and I take 5 of them away, what percentage of the apples are left? I would sit there with a blank stare, needing a pencil and a piece of paper. He would be enraged. My dad would catch me glancing across the table, trying my best to make eye contact with Andrew. It was my nonverbal plea to rescue me out of this. Don't look at Andrew for the answer, he would say. And I'd have to sit at the kitchen table long after dinner was over trying to figure it out. Thank goodness my kids didn't inherit my ineptness for mathematics. When Ben was around 7, he would consistently ask my dad to quiz him. Confidently, he'd say, "Grandpa, let's do math. Give me a word problem." I would gasp and hold my breath that history would not repeat itself. Fortunately, it didn't. My dad has met his match, so to speak. And one day Ben said, "No, Grandpa, give me something harder." My dad paused, thought about a worthy question, and said, "All right, if today I'm 80 years old and at your bar mitzvah, you'll be 13 years old. How many years away is your bar mitzvah? And how old will I be?" Well, I was sweating at that question. But Ben's wheels started turning and I could see him computing the calculations. When he got to the answer, he looked my dad straight in the eyes and said, 86, Grandpa, you'll be 86. Then Ben's voice softened and he said, "Grandpa, do you think you'll make it?" With tears in his eyes, my dad said, "I'm certainly going to try." My dad did more than try. He made it. For all the grandchildren's milestones, David, Michael, Danny, Ben, and Hattie's bar mitzvahs, he was there. He proudly watched Liliana graduate from high school over Zoom during the height of COVID. He went to basketball games and baseball games, always following up, wanting a full report on the final stats the next morning. He made it up to New Jersey to see Stephen win awards and celebrate his achievements. Steve, Dad was so proud of you. This past spring, we all made it out to Colorado for Sam and Maddie's B'nai Mitzvah. The family was together, inclusive of my Uncle Alan, my dad's older brother, who was also strong and able enough to take the trip. The brotherly bond that my father and Alan have shared is truly one for the record books. They were thick as thieves. I know my Uncle Alan is watching on Zoom with my Aunt Barbara and my cousins in New Jersey, who my dad adored. If any of our children and nieces and nephews are lucky enough to have and maintain even half the kinds of loving relationship my dad and Alan had, it will be a blessing beyond measure. My father painted a masterpiece that was his life. He was the true work of art. His canvas was colorful and deep. It allowed for questions and answers. He was a part of every painting, from serene landscapes ranging from peaks of mountaintops or the erratic motion of ocean waves, to portraits of animals, children, family members, public figures, symbolic images of social justice causes, and political current events. There were dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens more of canvases showcasing abundant tablescapes of food and wine. Not hard for me to see the messaging of the metaphoric beauty that was his joy for breaking bread with others, sharing moments, big and small, always welcoming his home and heart to all. His paintings were not always PG-13. In fact, many of his works of art were risque, to say the least. His love and desire evident. If you've been to my parents' home, then you know. And if you haven't, well, let's put it this way. When my kids were much, much younger, we would come for a visit. My mother would call ahead, giving me the heads up that she had covered some of the paintings that might be inappropriate for youthful eyes. The human body, or more notably, the female human body, his muse. But specifically, the ultimate muse of his entire being was unequivocally and undoubtedly my mother. I thought I knew inside and out the love story that was my mother and father. I thought I had watched it in real time for the past 51 years of my life. I had always been in awe of the deeply profound love, mutual respect, best friendship, equal partnership, undying loyalty and commitment they had for each other. In my father's eyes, my mother could do no wrong. She was number one from day one. He used to preach time and again, what could be wrong? I'm the luckiest man in the world. I have the most wonderful wife. She takes the most wonderful care of me. He would give my mother the credit wherever and whenever credit was due, and then some. Jane, he'd say, we get it right because you get it right. He meant every single word. I thought I knew the power of their connection, but it wasn't until these last few weeks I really understood the depth of the pure, unconditional devotion they had for each other. Mom, you were his strong and stay. Having bared witness to some of the tender expressions you both shared was the most treasured gift I will carry with me forever. Thank you for letting me be a part of that. Dad taught me long, long ago, I am only as good as my word. And I give you my word. I will always have your back and try my best to be your rock. Okay, hang on. We're just about there. Over the course of life, my father endured more than his share of medical uphill battles, but none more of sorrow than the loss of his firstborn son, my brother Jeffrey. But his love for family as a whole and subsequent restored faith in God somehow gave him the strength not only to go on, but to love life without bitterness. And I know it may sound greedy to want more days with a person who lives so long. But the fact that my dad was 91 and a half doesn't diminish it. It only magnifies the enormity of the room whose door has now quietly shut. In the final days of my dad's life, he whispered to me he was ready to rest, and he knew when it was time, he would go and get to see Jeffrey again. He exuded an aura of peace and calm and love. Dad, you did it all, your way, on your terms. You lived a magnificent, long, strong, happy, fulfilled life. I am so proud to be your daughter. I am so proud to be your Tiny. I will be even prouder to help keep your brilliant legacy alive. I will not allow myself to miss you because I know you'll be with me every step of the way. But Dad, it's now time to rest. You've earned it, and I love you.
Thank you so much, Rachel, for really bringing your dad to us today. And I'm just going to fill in some of the life facts and details that weren't mentioned. Howard was born on June 6th in 1932 in Newark, New Jersey. His mother, Molly, was a homemaker. His father, Martin, was an electrician who then went into the beverage business. He grew up in the Weewake. Week Wake.
There you go.
Thank you. Known as the Jewish section of Newark. And this had a very strong influence on his life. There, he became very dear friends with renowned author Philip Roth. All the boys in the neighborhood mostly became professionals, physicians, dentists, lawyers. Philip and Howard were in a club of 5, all of which became those professionals, except Philip was the schlepper, the writer. Not much of a schlepper, though. Howard attended Hashine Avenue Elementary School and went on to Weequahic High School. You said I'd butcher it, I'm sorry. He ran track and had letters, varsity letters. He played basketball. He was Mr. Popularity, very social, fun-loving, often a troublemaker. He spent many of his summers in the Catskills at the White Row Hotel, a singles resort, where he had the time of his life, working hard, playing very hard. He graduated high school in 1950 and started at Franklin and Marshall. He only stayed for 2.5 years. You see, Howard went to the dean and said that he wanted to go to dental school. And the dean said, well, I don't how, you have to finish. And they made some arrangements. Howard took the appropriate exams. He did very well. And then he went on to University of Pennsylvania Dental School, very young when he graduated. And he was very proud. He started out working for a dentist in New Brunswick for a year, then said to himself, why am I doing this? Why am I not working for myself? He had a lot of chutzpah as a youngster. He knew he could do what he set out to do, and he did it. His father, who was a working man, helped him open up his office and practice and set him up, which was in Neptune, New Jersey, on Route 33. And Howard remained in the same location for 47 years. He was beloved, a successful and up-and-coming dentist at the time, and forevermore. In April of 1970, Howard met Jane. Jane's sister Linda and then partner Jack, who practiced law next door to Howard's dental office, introduced Howard to Jane. It was a pretty quick courtship. Howard was so popular and fun and successful. Apparently, he had millions of girlfriends, but when he found Jane, he knew he didn't want to lose her. They were married within 6 months in Jane's parents' home in Short Hills, New Jersey. It was a small and intimate ceremony with all of the people that mattered. They had a really wonderful honeymoon in Spain. In fact, just days ago, Howard and Jane were recalling their many memories from that trip. At first, they lived in an apartment right on the ocean in West End, New Jersey for 2 years. Then Jane was pregnant and went into labor a month early because she was carrying twins. Andrew and Rachel were born, and Jane returned home from the hospital to a new house with 2 babies, a baby nurse, and a dog in Deal, New Jersey, where they lived until they moved fully, permanently down to Florida. Howard was the best husband. Howard and Jane had such a special relationship. He understood who she was, what she needed. He was such a sensitive and mature gentleman always. Because we all know that blending families is not easy and takes a lot of hard work. And if it hadn't been for Howard, it would not have worked. Howard was supportive. Everything that was important to Jane was important to him. When she went back to work, he was even enthusiastically involved. He wanted to do what made her happy, and vice versa. In their heyday, they traveled the globe, and every time they would see a special spot, like in Bali on the beach, looking at the moon, or in Egypt, in front of the pyramids, they said, "This is our spot," as they embraced. Howard was very active in the Jewish Federation. He was vice president, fundraising, vice president, significant contributor of many other organizations, but especially Jewish Federation. And as a father, as we heard, he was loving, he was supportive. He may have been the disciplinarian, but by the looks of this beautiful family up here in the first couple of rows, he knew what he was doing. Howard and his brother Alan, his beloved brother Alan, each had their own practices, but they shared a satellite practice where they worked together, and it was a hugely successful enterprise, a unique and loving business family relationship throughout their entire lives. After building his practice from the ground up with 2 full-time dentists working for him, Howard retired in 2006. And Jane and Howard moved down to Florida full-time and were there together for 18 blessed years. He had a charmed life, charmed partnerships. He played golf, started painting, and as we heard, was wonderful with his painting. The neighbors called him Picasso as he painted out of the garage in the afternoons. He went to the community pool, to the exercise class. He was the mayor of the pool. He was a family man. He loved to socialize. He was well known for his marvelous sense of humor, his quick wit, and his ability to be humorous in appropriate and inappropriate times. He had lots of Howardisms that we will all cherish. Everyone gravitated to him for his silliness and to his laughter. His joke with Rachel was that they both loved food, that they could talk food all day. And he would always say, make sure you have a good dessert. And he especially loved ice cream. Howard was a very spiritual man. In his soul, he was a very religious man, a believer who loved Judaism. He said prayers for a very long time, twice a day. Every morning before he walked out of the bedroom, he began his day with a little Talmud study. He and his good friend Howard Begill, in fact, studied Daf Yomi, Talmud study, for years. Howard Begill will always remember their good times studying together, and Howard remembers Howard as a sweet and humble man, always. Howard's maternal grandfather gave him his tallis, his prayer shawl, for his bar mitzvah. It was used as his chuppah, for his wedding and for the weddings of Rachel and Andrew, and for all of their grandchildren's brisses and bar mitzvahs. They used this tallis. It traveled from coast to coast, from north to south, and it will eternally be with him, along with all of the memories and blessings and the legacy of his family, children and grandchildren. Until 1991, he was very healthy, but he had several major health issues, each nearly ending his life. and recovered each and every time. In fact, they called him a miracle. And through it all, Jane and Howard were so deeply blessed with so much support and unwavering love from Jane's sister Linda, Linda's partner Roman, and nephew David. Unfortunately, this time, we thought it was just another illness, but almost 92 is not the same as 70. At the end of their 53 years together, Howard and Jane made promises to each other. Howard made Jane promise that she would take care of herself, that she would be healthy and happy and good, and that everyone would be good and love each other so deeply. In fact, perhaps that can be done through one of their family traditions, whether it was a cup of coffee or alcoholic beverage. Howard would always make a toast to good health and happiness because he cared about everyone being healthy and happy, friends and family alike. A long life is not necessarily a full life, and a full life is not necessarily a long life. But Howard was among the fortunate of this world who found blessing in a full life that was a long life as well. We say in our tradition, who are the wealthy? They who are satisfied with their portion. Howard will be deeply missed, and today we offer comfort to so many, to his wife, Jane, to his children. We remember Jeffrey of blessed memory and his wife, Dara, to Steve and Michelle, to Andrew and Susan and Rachel, to his beloved brother, Alan, and wife, Barbara, and their children, Darren and Kirk, David and Sherry, Adam and Ellen, and all of their children. And of course, to Howard's grandchildren, Ben and Harrison, otherwise known as Hattie, Sam and Maddie, Michael and Danny, David and Liliana. A poem. When I come to the end, do not lament that the sun has set for me. Say a prayer and be content. Why cry for a soul set free? Miss me a little, but not too long, and not with your head bowed low. Remember the love that we once shared. Remember me, but let me go. This is a journey we all must take, and each of us goes alone. It's all part of the Master's plan. It's a small step on the road to home. When you are lonely and shed a tear, go to the friends we know. I am okay. Have no fear. Remember me, but let me go. May Howard's name always be for a blessing, and may his life continue to inspire us to live life to its fullest, to enjoy each and every day, to be the best person we can be, to stay healthy, to always be happy. Aleha Shalom. May Howard rest in peace, and let us all say Amen. The family welcomes anyone who would like to pay their condolences this evening, well, immediately following interment at their home, and this evening at 7 p.m. for a minyan, a prayer service, so the family can say the mourner's Kaddish, as well as Saturday evening following Shabbat around 7 p.m. I will invite all to rise now for a memorial prayer. Oh, I didn't know about Friday. As well as the family invites all Friday to a luncheon at the club. If you need further details, you may ask following this ceremony. A memorial prayer, the El Male. El Male Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Hamtzei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei HaShechina, במעלות קדושים וטהורים כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים את נשמת אהרון הוש בן משה שהלך לעולמו בגן עדן תהיינו מנוחתו. אנא בעל הרחמים הסתירהו בסתר כנפיך לעולמים, וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתו, אדוני הוא נחלתו, וינוח לשלום על משכבו, ונאמר Amen. Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure to the soul of Howard Silver, who has gone to his eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May his soul be bound up in the bond of life. May he rest in peace. And let us say, Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, this does conclude the travel portion of the service. We are now going to head out to the graveside. You are able to take your vehicles, or you may walk, or we do have a golf cart this one there. You're going to head out, go all the way down on the right, and then make another right to the green tent. We're going to take the casket out first. I'm going to ask the immediate family to follow directly behind the casket, and everybody else to follow behind them. Thank you.